Welcome to DEIJ Hot Takes. My name is Daryl Sinclair, and this is the podcast where we discover the bold and transformative ideas shaping diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice work today. In this episode, we are joined by Estelle Baroung Hughes, who is the secondary principal at the International School of Dakar, president of Africa Learning International, and a board member of the Association of International Schools in Africa. Estelle, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure, and thank you so much, Daryl, for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us. I would like to add that you have been someone whose work and conference sessions, especially the one I saw at the IB Global Conference, has personally inspired me. So if anyone gets the opportunity to see you speak and present, I recommend that they do so. But going on with the podcast, could you please share with us your DEIJ hot take that guides your work?
Thank you so much, Daryl. I always remember that I started DEIJ work thanks to my children. I wanted them to come back home and say, Mom, we talked about Africa, not, oh, Mom, we talked about Africa again at school. So it started with the idea that I needed to impact the education of my children so that they can become the people that they need to become, fulfill their potential. So today, I also keep my eyes on the prize when I do DEI work. I know that we've
Mhm.
been through a lot sometimes as people of minoritized group, but the idea is to use that trauma to propel us, not to drag us down. And when we do the work, thinking about speaking our truth, but also dreaming our dream and taking all the necessary steps to create the society, the school, the workplace that we want, versus only focusing on repairing, which is important, crucial. But my mission is beyond the repairing, uh, having a dream towards which I am moving and being intentional about taking the steps to get there.
Wow. So this is all about the idea of having a vision, an aspiration, where you want to get to. I always find visioning to be an interesting concept. Could you take us through what this means specifically, maybe with some more examples that you have in the context of equity work? Why do you feel that this is a hot take? Are other people not doing this? And how does visioning show up in your work at your school in particular?
Hmm. So I feel that it is all about the steps. You cannot go to Z without going through the alphabet, but keep in mind where you're going, right? So the repair work, the work done when we use listening tools, what comes up, it's often trauma, it's often things that need to be fixed and repaired, as I was saying. Let's do this work and continue to do it as long as it's needed. And I suspect that it will always be needed. But that is not where all this stops. What do we want for our schools? What do we want for our workplace? What do we want for our world? For me, the vision is peace. And how do you get to peace? Is by rehumanizing everybody, by being more than your trauma, and by accepting that the other person in front of you is more than the oppression that they might have caused voluntarily or not. We are together in this walk to create a world where we can both exist happily and harmoniously, in any case, intentionally.
Wow, thank you. I mean, this really reflects experiences I've had within the educational space and doing equity work. I think a common feature is that for many individuals in their equity work, trauma has almost become their identity or an identity they put at the forefront. For example, I would say people who refer to themselves as oppressed as an identity rather than a circumstance. Can you help us to understand why such an approach can actually prevent successful movements towards peace, as you say, and equity work?
Mm. A lot of DEI work starts with trauma that's when we say enough. No justice, no peace is very true, right? Um, However, the trauma will always be there. It will always be talking. We don't need to give it all the power. We hear what's happening in our hearts, we hear what's happened in the past, and we take authority over it and we say, okay, I'm not going to let you define me. And how does that work? It means accepting that the other person in front of you, even if they are categorized in the same group as you, has had different
Hmm.
experiences. uh,
Yes.
Contextualizing is very important. Who is in the room? Can we talk about who we are? Can we learn to know who we are? This will definitely help us go beyond these codified identities and
Mhm.
understand that there is power in reconciliation, and compromise is not a weakness. That's how we move forward together because we're not digging our heels in.
I love how you refer there to contextualizing and the coded identities that at times we're given. We're not even creating ourselves. We are labeled and we are identified. Uh, Respecting the idea of context and the idea that we are a product of our histories and the histories of our identities. For yourself, what does it? Can you think of an example you've experienced in your work where you have seen trauma engaged with in a way to move forward rather than allow it to drag us down?
First of all, we have to feel our emotions. We have to accept that we even have inherited sometimes some trauma from our grandfathers and our forefathers and our ancestors. We also have inherited a lot of strength, the strength to say no and to demand accountability and to demand trust to be built, right? So this is remains very important. And then we open the window. We open the window towards putting together the project that we are on. Norming is very important. When everybody is discussing what their boundaries are and how we can fruitfully put together a strategic plan to develop belonging within the school that everybody feels they can adhere to, I think it's more important than dwelling on the power of trauma, because there's a lot of pull there. We need to resist the pull, hear it, continue to build together.
Thank you. So I do find that where we use our trauma not as our identity and we don't allow it to become who we are, because I feel listening to what you said, where we use our trauma to present who we are, that's who we will become as well. So to give that space for aspiration, to give that space for the idealized futures that we would like to achieve with peace, with equity, with belonging, we need to take a more contextualized view. Um, at this point, what I like to get from you is for our listeners, what's a key takeaway that you would like to leave them with? It might be a resource, it might be something for them to read, or it might just be a reflective question for them to consider as they move forward with their own work. What's a key takeaway you might have for our listeners?
I want to say, think about your children. And when I say your children, I mean biological children, but also the children that we have at school as educators, also the children that we have adopted spiritually. What is the world that you want to create for them? Focus on that. I think it gives a lot of light to do this work. And I just also want to highlight that when we have this thinking about the children and the future, we do this work all the better when people who have not been through the trauma that we have experienced understand that our decision to forgive, our decision to move forward together doesn't mean that our story, our history should be disregarded.
Powerful words, and a lovely message for our listeners. One thing that has come to mind while you've been speaking, that I will link in the description for this video, is a campaign which is taking place in the UK at the moment, where they're challenging the representation of Black History Month in schools as being something which is purely about slavery, trauma, apartheid, oppression, and actually using it as an opportunity to celebrate the fact that the first mathematicians, the first mathematical tools were discovered in African villages designed by women, and doing all this work to understand the aspiration of where we can go and what we can become, not simply the trauma we have faced. So, such a powerful message, and thank you for such a thoughtful discussion. For our listeners, I will place links in the description where you can connect with Estelle and explore her ideas and her work. Thank you for watching or listening, and I will see you on our next episode of DEIJ Hot Takes. Thank you so much, Estelle.
Thank you, Daryl.